What I'm about to tell you is a story that will test everything you believe about hope, mother's intuition, and the power of never giving up. It's a story that took 18 years to unfold, and it begins with every parent's worst nightmare and ends with a miracle that defies all odds. This is the true story of Sarah Mitchell, and how a single moment in a grocery store checkout line changed everything. October 15, 2006. It was a crisp autumn morning in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and 28-year-old Sarah Mitchell was running late for work again. As a single mother working 2 jobs, mornings at a dental office and evenings at a local restaurant, Sarah's life was a carefully choreographed dance of schedules, deadlines, and the constant juggling act that comes with raising a 3-year-old daughter on your own. Emma Mitchell was everything to Sarah. Born with bright hazel eyes and an infectious giggle, Emma had her mother's dark curls and her grandmother's stubborn streak. At 3 years old, she was already showing signs of independence that both delighted and terrified Sarah. Emma loved books, had an imaginary friend named Rainbow, and could charm anyone within 30 seconds of meeting them. That morning, like every Tuesday and Thursday for the past 6 months, Sarah dropped Emma off at Little Sunshine Daycare on Maple Street. It was a small, family-run facility with excellent reviews and reasonable rates, exactly what a struggling single mother needed. "Bye-bye, Mama," Emma called out, already running toward the play area where her favorite toys waited. She blew Sarah a kiss, something they'd done every morning since Emma learned how. "Bye, baby girl. I love you to the moon and back," Sarah called out, their special phrase. "And to the stars and back," Emma shouted in response, giggling as she disappeared around the corner. It was the last conversation they would have for 18 years. "Miss Mitchell." The voice belonged to Mrs. Chen, the daycare director, but there was something wrong with her tone. Something that made Sarah's stomach drop. "Yes, this is Sarah. Is Emma okay?" There was a pause that lasted forever. "Miss Mitchell, I need you to come to the daycare right away. And you might want to call the police." The next few hours became a blur of sirens, questions, and a growing sense of unreality that would follow Sarah for the rest of her life. Emma had been playing in the fenced outdoor area with 6 other children when a maintenance worker had arrived to fix a broken gate latch. The worker, who had proper identification and had been cleared by the main office, had been given access to the playground. Sometime between 1:30 and 2:15 p.m., while the regular staff was dealing with a minor crisis involving a child with a bloody nose, Emma had simply vanished. The gate was found open, the maintenance worker was gone, and there was no trace of either. The investigation that followed was swift and thorough, but it led nowhere. The maintenance worker's identification was fake. The company he claimed to work for had no record of any scheduled repairs. Security cameras at nearby businesses showed a white van leaving the area around 2 p.m., but the license plate was obscured and the driver was unidentifiable. Emma Mitchell had simply disappeared. What followed were the darkest years of Sarah's life. She quit her jobs to focus entirely on finding Emma. She plastered the city with missing person flyers, organized search parties, worked with private investigators she couldn't afford, and appeared on every local news program that would have her. The police did everything they could, but as weeks turned to months and months turned to years, the case grew cold. Well-meaning friends and family members eventually began suggesting that Sarah move on and start healing. But how do you move on when half of your heart is missing? Sarah's marriage to her college boyfriend, David, which had happened when Emma was 4 years old and missing for 6 months, eventually crumbled under the weight of grief and obsession. David wanted to have children of their own, wanted to build a life together, but Sarah couldn't let go of the daughter who was still out there somewhere. "She's still alive," Sarah would insist during their final argument. "I can feel it. I'm her mother, I would know if she was gone." David, exhausted and heartbroken, finally moved out. I can't compete with a ghost, Sarah. And I can't watch you destroy yourself anymore. But Sarah wasn't destroying herself, she was preserving herself for the day Emma came home. Years passed. Sarah moved to a smaller apartment, took a job at a nonprofit organization that helped families of missing children, and never stopped looking. She aged photos of Emma on her computer, showing what her daughter might look like at 5, at 10, at 15. She followed every lead, no matter how thin. She never missed Emma's birthday, always buying a present and a cake, just in case. The world moved on, but Sarah remained frozen in that October afternoon when her 3-year-old daughter had blown her a kiss and disappeared forever. Until October 15, 2024. 18 years to the day after Emma's disappearance, Sarah was standing in line at a Target in downtown Minneapolis. She was buying groceries and had grabbed a magazine from the checkout rack, Vogue's college edition, featuring America's most promising young models and artists. As she flipped through the pages while waiting, something made her stop breathing. On page 47, there was a full-page photograph of a young woman modeling a vintage-inspired dress. The model was listed as Emma Rose, 21, fine arts student at Northwestern University. But it wasn't the name that caught Sarah's attention, it was the face. The hazel eyes were exactly the same. The smile, even in this professional, polished photograph, had the same slightly crooked quality that had made 3-year-old Emma's grin so distinctive. The dark curls had been straightened and styled, but the bone structure, the set of the shoulders, the way she tilted her head just slightly to the left, it was all achingly familiar. But what stopped Sarah's heart completely was a small detail that most people would never notice. In the photograph, the young woman was wearing a delicate silver bracelet. And hanging from that bracelet was a tiny charm, a crescent moon and star. Sarah's hands began to shake. When Emma was 2 years old, Sarah had bought her a cheap plastic bracelet with that exact charm from a mall kiosk. Emma had loved it so much that she'd cried whenever she had to take it off. Could this sophisticated young woman really be wearing a charm that matched a toddler's toy from 19 years ago? Ma'am. Ma'am, are you okay? The cashier was looking at her with concern. Sarah looked up, realizing she'd been staring at the magazine for several minutes and that the line behind her was growing restless. I need to buy this, she stammered, holding up the magazine with trembling hands. At home in her small apartment, Sarah spread the magazine open on her kitchen table and studied the photograph with a magnifying glass. She compared it to hundreds of photos of Emma, to the aged progressions she'd created over the years, to every missing child poster she'd ever made. The resemblance was undeniable, but resemblance wasn't proof. Sarah had been down this road before, had chased dozens of false hopes and dead ends over the years. But something about this felt different. This felt real. She Googled Emma Rose Northwestern University and found a website for the university's art department. There, in the student gallery section, were more photographs of the same young woman, this time identified as Emma Rose, Jr., fine arts major with concentration in photography. The artist's statement read, "My work explores themes of identity, memory, and the search for belonging. Having grown up in an unconventional situation, I'm interested in how we construct our sense of self when traditional family narratives are absent or incomplete." Sarah read that paragraph a dozen times. Unconventional situation. Traditional family narratives are absent. What did that mean? She spent the next week doing research that would make a private investigator proud. She found Emma Rose's social media accounts, her class schedules, even a few news articles about art shows she'd participated in. The young woman appeared to be exactly what she claimed, a talented 21-year-old college student studying art in Chicago. But there were things that didn't add up. Emma Rose seemed to have no social media presence before she turned 18. There were no childhood photos, no mentions of family, no high school friends tagging her in old memories. It was as if Emma Rose had simply materialized as an adult. Sarah found an address, an apartment building near Northwestern's campus. She found a phone number. She found out that Emma Rose worked part-time at a coffee shop called The Daily Grind, and that she usually worked Tuesday and Thursday afternoons. For a week, Sarah sat in her car outside The Daily Grind, working up the courage to go inside. What would she say? What if she was wrong? What if she was right? Finally, on a Thursday that felt exactly like that October day 18 years ago, Sarah walked into the coffee shop. Emma Rose was behind the counter, taking orders and chatting with customers. In person, the resemblance was even more striking. She had the same animated way of talking that 3-year-old Emma had possessed, the same habit of tucking her hair behind her ear when she was concentrating. Sarah ordered a coffee and found a table where she could watch without being obvious about it. For an hour, she studied this young woman who might be her daughter, looking for more signs, more proof. And then Emma Rose laughed at something a customer said, and Sarah's world tilted on its axis. It was Emma's laugh. Not similar to it, not reminiscent of it, it was exactly the same delighted giggle that had filled Sarah's apartment 21 years ago. Sarah stood up so abruptly that she knocked over her chair. Emma Rose looked over at the sound, and for just a moment, their eyes met across the crowded coffee shop. Something flickered in Emma Rose's expression, confusion, maybe, or recognition. She tilted her head to the left, studying Sarah with an intensity that made Sarah's heart race. Then a rush of customers came in, and the moment was broken. Sarah fled. At home, she paced her apartment for hours, trying to figure out what to do next. She couldn't just walk up to a stranger and say, "I think you're my daughter who was kidnapped 18 years ago." But she also couldn't walk away from the strongest lead she'd had in nearly 2 decades. Finally, she decided to write a letter. "Dear Emma Rose," she began, and then stared at the blank page for an hour. How do you encapsulate 18 years of searching, hoping, and grieving in a single letter? How do you explain to someone that you think they might be living someone else's life? In the end, Sarah kept it simple. My name is Sarah Mitchell. On October 15, 2006, my 3-year-old daughter Emma was taken from a daycare in Minneapolis. I've been looking for her ever since. I saw your photograph in a magazine, and I believe you might be my daughter. I know this sounds impossible, but I hope you'll give me a chance to explain. If you're willing to meet with me, or even just to talk on the phone, it would mean everything to me. If I'm wrong, I apologize for disturbing your life. But if I'm right, Emma, I've never stopped looking for you, and I've never stopped loving you. She included her phone number and address, and before she could lose her courage, she mailed the letter to Emma Rose's apartment. 3 days later, her phone rang. Ms. Mitchell. The voice was young, nervous, but achingly familiar. This is Emma Rose. I got your letter. Sarah sat down hard on her couch, her legs suddenly unable to support her. Thank you for calling. I need to ask you something, Emma Rose said. And I need you to be completely honest with me. Anything. Did your daughter have a birthmark? A small strawberry mark on her left shoulder blade. Sarah's vision blurred with tears. Yes. Yes, she did. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Ms. Mitchell. I think we need to meet. 2 days later, Sarah sat in a small diner on the outskirts of Chicago, waiting for a young woman who might be her daughter. She'd driven the 6 hours from Minneapolis in a state of nervous anticipation that made it impossible to eat, sleep, or think about anything else. When Emma Rose walked into the diner, Sarah knew immediately. It wasn't just the physical resemblance, it was something deeper, something that had nothing to do with appearance and everything to do with the invisible connection between a mother and child. They sat across from each other in a booth by the window, two strangers who might be family, trying to figure out how to bridge an 18-year gap. "I need to tell you some things," Emma Rose said quietly. "Things I've never told anyone." Sarah nodded, afraid to speak. "The people who raised me, they told me my birth parents died in a car accident when I was very young. They said they adopted me through a private agency, that there were no other relatives. I never questioned it because I didn't remember anything from before I was about 4 or 5. She paused, fidgeting with something in her hands. "But I've always had these dreams. Fragments, really. A woman with dark hair singing to me. A yellow room with butterflies on the walls. Someone saying, 'I love you to the moon and back.'" Sarah gasped. Emma's nursery had been yellow with butterfly decals, and, "I love you to the moon and back," had been their special phrase. Emma Rose continued, "When I turned 18 and could access my adoption records, I found out that a lot of the paperwork was questionable. Inconsistent dates, missing signatures, agencies that didn't seem to exist anymore. I started to suspect that something wasn't right about my origin story." She reached into her purse and pulled out a small object, placing it on the table between them. It was the crescent moon and star charm from her bracelet. "I've had this since I was little. The people who raised me said it was with me when they got me, that it must have belonged to my birth mother. I've worn it every day for as long as I can remember." Sarah reached into her own purse and pulled out her phone. She scrolled through her photos until she found one of 3-year-old Emma wearing her plastic bracelet with the same charm. Emma Rose looked at the photo, then at Sarah, then back at the photo. "Oh my God," she whispered. What followed was 3 hours of comparing memories, sharing stories, and slowly, carefully, reconstructing 18 years of lost time. Emma Rose, who had been given the name Emily by her captors, told Sarah about her childhood with the couple who had taken her. "They weren't monsters," she explained. "They were an older couple who couldn't have children of their own and who had convinced themselves that they were saving her from something. They'd moved frequently during her childhood, always staying just ahead of any potential investigation. They'd homeschooled her, isolated her from other children, and filled her head with stories about her tragic past. When Emily turned 16, the woman she'd called mother had died of cancer. The man she'd called father, consumed with guilt and grief, had suffered a heart attack 2 years later. Emily had been left alone with a trust fund, a fake identity, and the growing suspicion that her entire life had been built on lies. I never felt like I belonged anywhere, she told Sarah. I always felt like I was looking for something, but I didn't know what. Sarah, through her tears, told Emma about the 18 years of searching, the investigators, the false leads, the nights spent staring at age progression photos wondering if her little girl was out there somewhere. I never gave up, she said. Even when everyone told me I should. I knew you were alive. I could feel it. As the afternoon wore on, they began to fill in the gaps. Sarah showed Emma photos and videos from her first 3 years of life. Emma shared artwork she'd created over the years, pieces that, in retrospect, seemed to be searching for something lost. There's something else, Emma said as they prepared to leave the diner. Something I need to know. What is it? That phrase you said I used to say. I love you to the moon and back. What was my response supposed to be? Sarah's heart swelled with a mixture of joy and pain. And to the stars and back. Emma's eyes filled with tears. I've been saying that my whole life. Whenever I missed someone, whenever I felt alone, I would whisper, and to the stars and back, to myself. I never knew why. The reunion wasn't immediate or magical in the way movies might suggest. There were DNA tests to confirm what their hearts already knew. There were legal complications involving Emma's false identity and the estate of her kidnappers. There were months of therapy to help both women process the trauma and lost time. But slowly, carefully, mother and daughter began to rebuild their relationship. Emma kept her chosen name but legally changed her last name to Mitchell. She transferred to the University of Minnesota to be closer to Sarah, but maintained her independence by living in her own apartment. They established new traditions: weekly dinners, monthly art gallery visits, daily phone calls. They shared 18 years' worth of stories, dreams, and experiences. Sarah learned that her daughter had become a talented photographer whose work focused on themes of identity and belonging. Emma learned that her mother had spent nearly 2 decades helping other families navigate the nightmare of missing children. "You know what's strange?" Emma said one evening as they looked through old photo albums together. "I've been taking pictures of mothers and children for years. I was always drawn to that relationship, always trying to capture something I felt like I was missing." "You were looking for us," Sarah said simply. "Even when you didn't know what you were looking for." The case of Emma's kidnapping was reopened, but with both perpetrators dead, there was little justice to be found in the legal system. The real justice was in the reunion itself, in the family that had been broken finally becoming whole again. A year after their reunion, Emma held her first solo art exhibition. The centerpiece was a series of photographs titled "Finding Home," featuring portraits of mothers and children, families reunited, and the spaces between loss and love. The exhibition's artist statement read, "This work explores the journey back to ourselves, the power of love to transcend time and distance, and the truth that some bonds cannot be broken, no matter how much time passes or how far we travel from where we began." On the opening night, Sarah stood in the gallery surrounded by Emma's work, watching her daughter, now 22 years old and radiant with purpose, talk to visitors about her art and her story. "She's remarkable," a gallery visitor said to Sarah. "You must be so proud." "I am," Sarah replied, tears in her eyes. "I always was, even when I didn't know where she was." A mother's love doesn't disappear just because the child does. As the evening wound down, Emma found Sarah standing in front of the final photograph in the series. It was a self-portrait of Emma and Sarah together, taken on the first anniversary of their reunion. They were both crying and laughing at the same time, holding each other as if they'd never let go again. "What do you think?" Emma asked. "I think," Sarah said, pulling her daughter close, "that some miracles take 18 years to unfold." "I love you to the moon and back, Mom," Emma whispered. "And to the stars and back, baby girl," Sarah replied. "Always and forever, to the stars and back." The story of Sarah and Emma Mitchell became a testament to the power of a mother's intuition, the importance of never giving up hope, and the truth that love really can conquer time, distance, and even the cruelest circumstances. Because sometimes, the most incredible stories are the ones that take decades to tell, and the most beautiful endings are the ones that seemed impossible until the moment they become real. And sometimes, all it takes is the right photograph in the right magazine at exactly the right moment to change everything forever. Don't forget to like the videos and subscribe to the channel for more short stories.